Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to have a real story where 12 Filipinos outsmarted a full Japanese army. We have a lot of this story on the channel. I'm going to leave some cards at the end of the video, the special one. It's the one where 40 Filipino soldiers defied a direct order from the UN. So make sure to stick until the end to see that as well. And this one, it's going to be from 28th, 1945. So it's an old story, but it says how smart and how beautiful are the Filipino. It doesn't matter if people, civilians, or soldiers. So let's go and watch this.
January 28th, 1945. Cabanatuan, Luzon, Philippines. Deep inside Japanese-occupied territory, 12 men move through the darkness without making a sound. No artillery support behind them. No armored vehicles. No air cover. Just 12 soldiers on foot, deep inside territory controlled by thousands of Japanese troops, moving toward a prison camp that held 511 dying American and Allied prisoners of war. The Japanese garrison guarding the camp numbered more than 200 armed soldiers. Another 8,000 Japanese troops were camped less than a mile away on the main road. And somewhere beyond that, an entire Japanese army of more than 150,000 soldiers occupied the island of Luzon. 12 men, one mission, zero margin for error. If they were discovered before they reached the camp, every prisoner inside would be executed before dawn. They were not discovered. They reached the camp. They completed the mission. And what they did that night became one of the most celebrated special operations in the history of modern warfare. But the raid on Cabanatuan was only one mission. Before that night, these men had spent months moving invisibly through one of the most heavily occupied territories on Earth, mapping Japanese positions, counting enemy troops, reporting the exact locations of artillery, armor, and infantry to American commanders planning the liberation of the Philippines. 12 soldiers who went where no army could go, saw what no reconnaissance aircraft could see, and came back every single time with intelligence that shaped the outcome of the entire Pacific campaign. This is their story. The Alamo Scouts were born from necessity. In 1943, General Walter Kruger, commander of the 6th United States Army, understood something that most military planners of the era were slow to accept. Intelligence was the difference between victory and catastrophe. In the Pacific theater, fighting across thousands of islands, through jungle terrain that swallowed entire battalions, against an enemy that used the land the way a fish uses water, conventional reconnaissance was not enough. Aircraft could not see through jungle canopy. Larger patrols were too loud and too slow.
Do you imagine the courage that you need to have to do something like this? And see, that's why I love Philippines. That's why I love Filipino people. They're not doing it for them. They're doing it to save 511 persons. It doesn't matter if they're from Philippines or whatever nation. That's why how big the heart of a Filipino is. And that's why this channel is dedicated to the Philippines. And I hope I can bring together the biggest community online for Filipino people that they are. And not only because, like, I feel a little Filipino by heart, you know, maybe there are a lot of you out there that are not from the Philippines, but you love this country. Man, what a story.
Kruger needed was something different. Small teams of extraordinary soldiers, trained to move silently through enemy territory for days at a time, gather precise intelligence, and return without ever being detected. He needed men who could become ghosts. The training program that created the Alamo Scouts was brutal by any standard. Volunteers from across the 6th Army were selected, subjected to rigorous physical and psychological testing, and then pushed through weeks of specialized training in combat swimming, small boat operations, hand-to-hand combat, jungle survival, map reading, radio communications, and techniques of movement through occupied territory without detection. The program was designed to eliminate anyone who was not exceptional. Most volunteers did not make it through. Those who did emerged as something that had never existed before in the American military. Trained reconnaissance operators capable of functioning as self-sufficient units in the most hostile environments imaginable, gathering precise military intelligence under conditions where a single mistake meant death for themselves and the men depending on their reports. Filipino soldiers and scouts were central to what made the Alamo Scouts effective. The Philippines was their terrain. The jungle was familiar to them in ways that no training could replicate for soldiers from the American mainland. The local knowledge, the cultural connections to village communities that provided shelter and information, the ability to move through Philippine jungle terrain with the kind of instinctive understanding that only comes from having grown up in it. All of this made Filipino participation not just useful but essential. When an Alamo Scout team moved through Luzon or Leyte or Mindanao, it was Filipino knowledge of the land that kept them alive. Filipino contacts in occupied villages that fed them intelligence. Filipino courage that made them willing to step into territory where capture meant torture and execution without hesitation. Between January 1944 and the end of the war in 1945, the Alamo Scouts conducted more than 100 missions. They operated in teams of 6 to 12 men, moving through Japanese-held territory on Leyte, Luzon, Mindanao, and across the smaller islands of the Philippine archipelago. They spent days at a time behind enemy lines, sometimes in proximity to thousands of Japanese troops, observing, counting, mapping, and reporting. They identified Japanese troop concentrations before major Allied landings, allowing commanders to adjust their plans and avoid defenses that would have cost thousands of lives. They confirmed or corrected intelligence estimates that shaped the timing and location of every major amphibious operation in the Philippine campaign. And through more than 100 of these missions, not a single Alamo Scout was lost to enemy action. That is not a minor detail. That is the central fact that defines what the Alamo Scouts were. In 100 missions into territory held by an army of over 350,000 Japanese soldiers across the Philippine archipelago, in conditions where detection meant death, in operations conducted in darkness through some of the most difficult terrain in the Pacific Theater, not one man was killed. Not one man was captured. The teams went in, completed their missions, and came back. Every single time. That record has never been matched in American Special Operations history. And it was built in the Philippines by small teams of men, many of them Filipino, moving through an occupied homeland where every step in the wrong direction could have ended everything. The mission that brought the Alamo Scouts to the attention of the world happened in late January 1945. Allied forces had landed on Luzon. The liberation of the Philippines had begun. But inside the Japanese-occupied interior, 511 American and Allied prisoners of war were being held at a prison camp near the town of Cabanatuan. These men were survivors of Bataan, survivors of the Death March, survivors of years of brutal imprisonment that had already killed thousands of their comrades. They were starving, diseased, and in the final stages of physical collapse. And American intelligence had reason to believe that as Allied forces advanced, the Japanese would execute every prisoner in the camp rather than allow them to be liberated. 2 Alamo Scout teams were given the mission of reconnoitering the prison camp in preparation for a rescue operation. 6 men from the Scout team, led by Lieutenant John Dove, and 6 men from the team, led by Lieutenant William Nellis, crossed into Japanese-controlled territory and approached the camp on foot, moving through open farmland that offered almost no cover, navigating past Japanese patrols and troop concentrations that numbered in the thousands, and establishing observation positions from which they could study the camp's layout, count the guards, map the patrol routes, and assess the timing and pattern of the Japanese security rotation. They did this for 2 days and nights. 12 men lying in the grass and in shallow ditches within sight of a Japanese garrison, counting guards, timing patrols, sketching the positions of watchtowers and machine gun emplacements.
Now think about something. nowadays you can, I mean, I know there are brave people out there, especially scouts, rangers from the Philippines, but I'm talking about other armies. You know, now to do this, you have drones, you know, you can stay comfy and whatever. These are the real soldiers, and especially from the Philippines. Wow.
12 men who could not move, could not speak above a whisper, could not draw any attention to themselves in territory where attention meant death, gathering the precise intelligence that would determine whether 511 prisoners lived or died. Their report was complete and exact. The raid on Cabanatuan was executed on the night of January 30th. The 6th Ranger Battalion, guided by the intelligence the Alamo Scouts had gathered and supported by Filipino guerrillas from the local resistance, hit the camp in a coordinated assault. The Japanese garrison was neutralized. Every prisoner was freed. Of the 121 American soldiers who participated in the raid itself, 2 were wounded. Not one was killed. The Filipino guerrillas who provided crucial support throughout the operation suffered 9 wounded. Not one of the 511 prisoners was killed during the rescue. The precision of that outcome was not luck. It was the product of 2 days of exact intelligence gathered by 12 men lying in the grass outside a Japanese prison camp in the middle of occupied Luzon. The Rangers received most of the public recognition. The raid on Cabanatuan became famous. Films were made. Books were written. The story of the Rangers' assault on the camp was told and retold over decades. What was less often told was the 12 men who made the raid possible. The Alamo Scouts who spent 48 hours in the grass counting guards and mapping positions. The Scouts who could not fire a single shot, who had to remain completely invisible while Japanese soldiers walked patrol routes within yards of their concealed positions, who bore the entire weight of the mission's success on their ability to remain still and silent and invisible for 2 full days and nights. That invisibility was not simply a technique. It was a philosophy of warfare that the Alamo Scouts embodied in a way that no unit of their era matched. The conventional military thinking of the Second World War was built on mass. More men, more weapons, more artillery, more air power, more of everything pressing against the enemy until the weight became irresistible. The Alamo Scouts operated on a completely different principle. The right 12 men with the right intelligence could do something that an entire division could not do. They could go where divisions could not go, see what divisions could not see, and return with information that made every one of those divisions more effective when they finally arrived. 12 men could not defeat a Japanese army by fighting it. But 12 men could make the difference between that army being defeated or not.
True.
The
So
Alamo
true.
Scouts never numbered more than a few hundred men across the entirety of their existence as a unit. They were always small, always selective, always deliberately kept below the threshold of visibility that would force them into the kind of conventional operations that would have destroyed what made them effective. Every man who wore the Alamo Scout tab had passed through a selection process designed to find the kind of soldier who could function alone behind enemy lines, who could make critical decisions without guidance, who could hold still in a ditch for 48 hours while an enemy army moved around him, and who could come back with information so precise and complete that commanders could plan on it with absolute confidence. The Alamo Scouts were deactivated in November 1945, shortly after the Japanese surrender.
Wow.
In 2 years of operations across the Philippine archipelago and beyond, they had conducted more than 100 missions without a single combat fatality. They had gathered intelligence that shaped every major operation of the Philippine Liberation Campaign. They had directly enabled the rescue of more than 500 prisoners of war from certain death. And they had demonstrated something about the nature of warfare that military thinkers and special operations planners would spend the next 80 years trying to fully understand. That sometimes the most decisive force on a battlefield is not the largest force. That perfect intelligence delivered by 12 extraordinary men can determine the outcome of a campaign that involves hundreds of thousands. That the right people in the right place, trained to an absolute standard and willing to accept risks that conventional military thinking would never authorize, can change the course of a war. The Philippines gave the world the Alamo Scouts. Filipino knowledge of the terrain, Filipino contacts in occupied communities, and Filipino courage on those missions made the unit what it was. When those 12 men lay in the grass outside Cabanatuan and counted guards through 2 days and nights of silence, they were doing what Filipino warriors had always done in every conflict on that land. Using knowledge of the terrain, patience that came from deep familiarity with the environment, and a willingness to accept danger not for personal glory, but for a mission that mattered. The prisoners inside that camp were not Filipino soldiers. They were American. But the scouts who made their rescue possible understood something that transcends nationality. Those men inside the wire were someone's brothers, someone's sons, someone's husbands. And leaving them, there was not something that 12 soldiers lying in the grass outside Cabanatuan were willing to accept.
Exactly what I said.
The 511 prisoners who walked out of that camp on January 31st, 1945, many of them too weak to walk on their own, carried by Rangers and Filipino guerrillas through the darkness toward Allied lines, owed their lives to a chain of decisions and actions that ran all the way back to 12 men who had agreed to lie in a ditch and not make a sound. The Japanese army never knew they were there. The guards never saw them. The patrols never detected them. 12 soldiers had walked into the middle of an army of thousands and walked back out again with everything they needed. And 511 men who had survived years of imprisonment survived one more night because of it. That is what 12 Filipino-trained soldiers did to an entire Japanese army. Not by fighting it, not by matching its numbers or its firepower, by being better, by being more disciplined, more patient, more precise, and more committed to the mission than any conventional force could be. The Alamo Scouts never lost a man. The Japanese army never knew they were there. And 511 men came home. If this story moved you, if you believe soldiers like the Alamo Scouts deserve to be remembered by a world that has largely forgotten them, subscribe and turn on notifications.
You can find the original link of this video down below. Beautiful story. I checked it. It's true. You go and Google it if you want. Man, what? I mean, see, I said it before. They went to risk their lives, not to save somebody from the Philippines or from the family, but somebody that they didn't know, but it didn't matter. You know, they had a mission and they had courage and a big heart. And that's something beautiful. And I'm sorry that this department, the Alamo, it was, I don't know why it was, stopped for existence. Maybe because afterwards there is the Scout Rangers, I don't know. But this 12 men, man, they deserve respect and they deserve recognition. This guy over here mentioned that there is a movie also. Maybe I'm going to search it. Maybe you're going to have it here on the channel. But beautiful. See, how can you not love the Philippines? Full stop, man. What a story. Thank you for being here, guys. Don't forget to subscribe for getting more people and more Filipino here on the channel. And like I was saying, here, there is this video, which is an incredible story as well, if you didn't know about it. Thank you for watching. God bless the Philippines. And like I always say, stay safe.